Hi everyone, this is Luca. Thank you, Sylvia, for giving me the opportunity of making an English version of a video I posted yesterday, actually on Good Friday, about this very important Roman Catholic tradition of celebrating the Stations of the Cross, the Via Crucis of the Colosseum. It was very sad for us Romans to see Pope Francis celebrating the Via Crucis, the reenactment of the Passion of Christ, in this empty St. Peter's Square yesterday night. Because for us Romans, Good Friday means going to the Colosseum and celebrating the Stations of the Cross at the Colosseum. It's a very ancient tradition. So I'm going to tell you about the history of this ancient ceremony to understand a little bit more what's the connection between this ancient pagan monument and this very Catholic tradition. So we're going to travel back in time to 1750. It's precisely in that year that Pope Benedict XIV did something historic. He decided to dedicate the entire Flavian amphitheater, known as the Colosseum, to the memory of the martyrs and to the Passion of Christ. Why did he choose to do that? Because the Colosseum had always been associated with the story of the Christian martyrs. And this was a popular belief that these innocent Christians were thrown to the lions in front of this ruthless crowd of angry Romans. There's very little historical evidence supporting that. But that's another story. What we care about now is to see how this belief had an impact on the evolution of the monument. So in 1750, right after the consecration, the very first ceremony of the Via Crucis, the Stations of the Cross, was celebrated in the Colosseum in presence of the Pope. In this 19th century picture, you can see how Pope Benedict had the 14 Stations of the Cross placed all around the arena floor in the Colosseum, and you can see how the arena had not yet been excavated, so no underground structures are visible yet. In the center of it, you can see a big cross. What's left of this? A very little, since after the unification of Italy in 1870, all the Christian symbols were removed from the Colosseum, and they were only partially reinstalled, restored in 1926, following an important deal between the papacy and the Italian government. When you visit the Colosseum nowadays, you can see a newer cross on the side of the arena, consecrated by Pope John Paul II in occasion of the Jubilee year 2000. And you can see only one of the 14 Stations of the Cross, restored very recently in honor of Pope Francis. Why the consecration of the Colosseum in 1750 is so important to us? Because it not only had repercussions in Christian Catholic worship, but also because it corresponds to the beginning of a new phase in the history of the Colosseum. What Pope Benedict wanted to do was not only to honor this very important Catholic tradition, but to basically regain control of this monument. You have to think that for too many hundreds of years, the Colosseum had been kept in a state of total abandonment and decay. Marble and travertine from the Colosseum, all kinds of building materials from this ancient monument had been reused over the centuries to create these beautiful churches and palaces that embellished Renaissance and Baroque Rome. And a few years before the consecration in 1703, a terrible earthquake had further damaged the ancient structures. In addition to that, you have to think that the Colosseum over the years had become a very unsafe place, occupied by gangs of criminals, in a climate of anarchy that culminated in 1753 when the custodian of the chapel that was inside the Colosseum since the 1500s was attacked by one of these criminal gangs and was found almost lifeless near one of the entrances of the monument. This was perhaps the drop that overflows the vase and gave rise to this urgent need for Pope Benedict to bring order and bring the Colosseum back under his control. You might be surprised to hear there was a chapel in the Colosseum, and you might be even more surprised to hear that that chapel still exists in the Colosseum and that it's still active, and that, like every Sunday, there is Mass in the Colosseum. The reason the chapel is now basically hidden from the view of the visitors is because it's covered by layers of structures that had been added following subsequent restorations. But in this picture, you can see it very well. Again, it's a 19th century painting. You can see the chapel dedicated to Santa Maria della Pietà. You see the faithful celebrating Good Friday around it. And in this other picture, you can also see how the chapel looks today. So, knowing all that, you see how this Christian presence had a very important impact on the preservation of the monument. Without this consecration in 1750 by Pope Benedict XIV, a new season of restorations and attention to the preservation of the monument wouldn't have started. And so the history of the Via Crucis celebration is deeply intertwined with the history of the rebirth of the Colosseum that made it possible for this glorious monument to survive to the present day.